ADHD Rewired, episode number 31. This is the show designed for those of us who have really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. Whether you have ADHD and you want to learn more about it, or you are looking for ways to organize your time, your things, or the many details of life so you can get more done, this show is for you. My name is Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, coach, and consultant. We know that starting can be the hardest part, so let's get started. But first, let me thank my sponsor. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial. Go to audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. Check show notes for link. This episode, my interview with Sean Ackerman, is really a great one because he's a really dynamic person with a lot of experience, a lot of insight and knowledge that he's going to share with us. So we were kind of playing with titles. We think we came up with Don't Quit Your Day Job yet because he's just doing so much while he's still working a 9-to-5 job. And that part wasn't even really covered that much in our conversation. So I really hope that you gain a lot from this episode. It's really a just amazing story of true grit, perseverance, and how someone can take just an extraordinarily challenging, devastating situation and move forward with it. So without further ado, delay, procrastination, or tangents, here's the episode with Sean Ackerman of You Leading You. I think I got his pronunciation right. He corrected me during the show because I think I said it wrong. So hopefully I got it right this time. Here's the episode. I am here virtually with Sean Ackerman of the You Leading You podcast. I'm going to, unlike on Sean's podcast where he really does his homework and gives great intros to people, I'm going to do the easy part and let Sean introduce himself. Well, Sean, welcome to ADHD Rewired.
Hey, Eric, thank you very much. I appreciate being on your show. I know you were a guest on mine quite a while back, and we had a great connection. As a matter of fact, both of us, since we have a little bit of a background in ADHD, personally, the episode was at that time my longest running one yet. So I definitely appreciate that. Thank you very much. And my name is Sean Ackerman. I'm actually the host of the You Leading You podcast. I've been a podcaster for, I actually started this back in May with the concept beginning back in February. Very happy doing what I'm doing, which is essentially creating a personal leadership podcast focused around organizational success. So what I do is I actually sit down and talk with individuals of all walks of life, industries, facets, arts, and find out how they've achieved the success they've wanted to in life. Because I found, especially being ADHD, and you and I have talked about systems of systems, everything's broken down into some kind of a system, Eric. And I mean, really, that's the key to achieving any kind of success that we want to in life.
Absolutely. The systems is really, really critical. Now, you just used the phrase being ADHD. And so I like to really discuss and really talk about the power of language because it is very powerful. And so I like to use for myself, although today I think that I would kind of use the being ADHD. I actually posted on a Facebook group that I'm having an ADHD day, which is something, and I use the disclaimer, I don't usually say that, because what I say is I have ADHD. I'm a person with ADHD. But so you're saying, and you describe it as that you are ADHD.
Well, yes. I mean, in essence, when I was young, I was diagnosed probably at the age of 7 or 8. And to be honest, to remember back that far, it's kind of, we're talking the late 70s. And I was having a difficult time in school, having a problem focusing. And at the time, we were brought in and I was diagnosed and I had a hard time sitting still, et cetera. And I was diagnosed at the time as ADHD.
And so what year about was that?
Oh, goodness. We're probably talking 78, 79, maybe 80, but I doubt it. I think it was still 79.
Okay. So I would imagine that you were then must have been pretty hyperactive. Um,
Yes, and that's just it. And there was at the time, I mean, I didn't take medication when I was young. It was a matter of calming therapies and things of that nature.
okay, so now did you get therapies when you were younger?
I did, just in the very beginning. And what I found is I actually turned, at the time I was probably 7 or 8, and by the time I was actually 10 or 11, I had I was able to control my focus, and that was through some of the, I want to say training or some of the therapies that I had received that really showed me how to go ahead and have a focus and completing a singular task. And really that's what helped me to go ahead and gain success through school, which is a singular focus. And it hasn't always been easy.
Do you remember anything about what you were what you were taught? How did you learn to do that at that age?
Well, I do remember that there was a lot of focus on, and really it was interesting. There was a lot of focus on word and math problems. And these were the worksheets that this individual worked with me on. And what it had was a varying range of details within a lot of the word problems itself. And what I found was that there was actually a key to focusing in one area, because even the questions themselves had a tendency by design to make you drift in different areas. And what I was able to do was to work through these and I always remember this specifically, work through these word problems and have a focus. And then it kind of made a little internal trigger to always look for the focal point. And that always kind of helped me to keep my compass pointed due north.
So it sounds like someone at some point taught you really to think about your thinking, that metacognition, to not just the tips to how to solve the problem, but really how to think about solving the problem.
Yeah, and I think that's been one of my true successes and some of my largest downfalls is thinking and sometimes overthinking as well.
Oh, Sean, you and me both. It's have you ever seen that little thing you see on Facebook that says ADHD? I've had more thoughts since 9 a.m. than most people have all day.
Yes, I have. I like that one too.
So,
but you know what? But people have a lot of negative focus sometimes on the connotation of ADHD, and I'll be honest with you. I think that's, to me, it's an enhanced skill that it's just something that you need to master, and it's not something to really just overcome. I mean, I've been able to deliver some fantastic results in very stressful situations because of that.
Well, would you mind telling us about some of those?
Well, and and I don't usually talk about my day job, but I work in the energy industry, and one of the things that I know that occurred here back in 2012 was Hurricane Sandy, and things were utterly chaotic throughout the East Coast. And as an energy industry, there was a huge demand for the product that we served, which was propane. And there were a couple of us internally that were keeping the business moving forward as far as a communication hub. I was dealing with customer service and northern operations at the time. And to be honest with you, that's because of the chaos itself. That was an environment where really the leadership skills tied to the ability to be somewhat ADHD actually, I think, came in as a benefit.
Wow. So I know, in the past, one of my past jobs, I worked in residential treatment. And when we were in crisis mode, that was where it was like I was kind of just like conducting the orchestra, and everything just was perfectly in focus. My brain was completely calm and knew exactly what to do, how to do it, when to do it. It was when I had to get back to my office and do the paperwork is where I struggled.
Absolutely. It's funny, Eric. I'm reminded of being back in retail back in the mid 90s. I was with Walmart stores, and at the time it wasn't unusual for us to work, 70, 80, 90 hours a week in new stores and doing change and conversions. And, I always remember, those days when I would work like 36 hours straight. And again, this is going back, I think the statute of limitations is lifted at this point. But, I would work those straight hours and we would have to go ahead and clean the entire store. I'll just oversimplify it. And pull an entire team together. And you're exactly correct. It was like watching an orchestra come together And I think that's something that the ADHD mind has that capability to do, is to go ahead and have those tendrils that are going in what seemingly appears to be a million random directions, but actually has a connection to something out there, and that can, as long as you can harness that, you can bring that back together.
Yeah, I find for myself and lots of people that I work with ADHD that there is this really just natural ability to see the big picture among almost what seems to be unrelated ideas and connect them almost effortlessly. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Absolutely. And that's just it, to see that. And, I can almost say that we can see those connections, those ways to go ahead and make I'll use the word a pyramid, but to go ahead and make a structure work, we can actually see those building blocks and where they fall in line strategically. And in some respects, being ADHD is difficult to go ahead and say that you can always be strategic. But in some circumstances, and in some, obviously in something like a leadership role where you're looking at having to wear the not only the energy, but also the stress associated with the situation, it really seems to bring that out.
So, and one of the things that from what we were talking earlier about before we hit record is you were telling me that you're putting together a conference on leadership in California where you live. Is that right?
Well, actually, I'm in New York.
Oh, you're in New York.
Yep, that's okay. If anybody shows up in California, I won't be there. But in all seriousness, nope. I'm actually in upstate New York, Orange County. That's where I threw you off. I said Orange County.
Yes, and I just assumed that was California.
Yeah, it's not the one with the oranges. It's the one with the apples. So at any rate, no, I'm over here in Orange County, New York. And, one of the things I said is, as a leader that I've been in the various industries and businesses I've been with, I've always carried a training and a leadership torch. And with doing the You Leading You podcast, what I found is a lot of very similar items that are occurring between successful leaders. What I'm looking to do, and not even looking because I will be doing, on October 25th, I'm going to be launching an initial session called the Moving It Forward conference. And essentially it's a small 10-person workshop where we'll be sitting down and working one-on-one with individuals in a group environment, including a showcase for each one of those individuals to work through a program, whether they're working on anything from a book, a blog, a podcast, some sort of medium, or they're even looking to go ahead and make some additional marketing moves with their small business.
Well, and so at what point did this idea come to you where you had that aha? Because for me, I feel that sometimes I'm working on projects and I have a sense of where it's going to go, but I don't fully know until I'm really engaged in it. Mm-hmm. It's like when I started the podcast, I had a sense that, okay, this is going to lead to other things. I didn't quite know what it would be yet. So as I was getting into it, the idea of this coaching group kind of formed, and now I'm in the midst of doing this coaching group. And as now that I'm in the coaching group, the next kind of ideas are kind of churning in my mind. So what was it for you that went from, okay, I'm going to do a podcast to, oh, you know what, I should put this together and do this leadership conference?
Well, let me go ahead, and what really sparked this, and let me back up a little bit further. Mm-hmm. You Leading You was designed with the fact that I saw, because of some of my own personal hurdles that I know we talked about on my show, and I'll briefly summarize them here. In 2011, I lost my home to a flood in New York, actually from another Hurricane Irene, the year before. My wife and children and I were homeless for a couple of months, lived with family, live in a hotel. Got back on our feet. We let ourselves through it. And, I kept the game face on as the father. And about 18 months later, that veneer cracked. I ended up in the hospital with a stress attack. And I said to myself, you know what? I know I can lead this family. I know I can lead this life that I want to live. But the problem is I just gave so much to everything around me, including work and including my family. I never took a moment for myself to go ahead and say, hey, we just lost things, the things that we've spent the last 11 years building with my wife and I. And that's when I decided, You Leading You was where I wanted to go ahead and help others lead themselves. Well, I created a blog, and that was great. For about 7 months, I wrote a blog called You Leading You. And then I said, you know what? I like writing. It's okay. But I love talking. So I'm going to go ahead and I want to do a podcast. And I actually had worked with Michael O'Neill, the Solopreneur Hour, who's a fantastic not only coach and mentor, he's just a great individual overall, and, worked on getting a podcast launch. Well, in the midst of that, I wiped out my blog, wiped it out completely. So that was
I heard this story.
Yeah, it was non-recoverable.
Yeah, when I heard that, I actually remember I was driving in the car, and I heard that you uploaded it the wrong way or something. Mm-hmm. And wiped the whole thing out. And I had this feeling in the pit of my stomach for you. I was like, oh.
I had some great posts about my family, about personal leadership, and you know what? Then I said, you know what, but this is a failure, and we're going to go ahead and work through this. But I launched the podcast and have had fantastic communication success, with not only the interaction and the download numbers. I've been very happy with that. But I knew when I was doing the podcast, my initial thing behind doing You Leading You was the fact that I always loved helping people. And, it's the most open statement in the entire world, but I truly get enjoyment from bringing an individual from a path of where they're confused or not sure of where they're going to enlightenment through teaching and storytelling. And that's why the podcast was a perfect platform. But I also knew that I loved one-on-one individual conversations as well as group environments. I love talking on stage as well. And so I knew that personal coaching and public speaking was going to be part of what You Leading You was about. So that's kind of the backdrop. Well, in podcast movement here a little over a month ago, just a great community. And what I really sensed was...
For people that don't know, Podcast Movement was a national conference that was basically, it was just focused on podcasters.
Absolutely. And sorry about that. Sometimes we tend to focus within our own circles, and it was the first.
I thought you were saying conference. Sorry about that because I didn't get to go.
Well, no. I already told you sorry about that because I would have very much, so would Kim Trumbo, have loved to have gone ahead and seen you.
Yeah, I would love to be there.
It was a great event. But the thing that struck me at this event was the fact that, I've learned all these things online. I've made online connections, and that's great. And I'm having a fantastic time meeting these people one-on-one. But what really struck me was the sense of community and the personal interaction from being able to look at someone, reading their body language. And I said to myself, you know what, I can go ahead and pass on not only so much through the podcast, but also through a personal platform. So that's actually the day I landed is when I actually booked the hotel. And from there, I said,
I'm really? You flew there and booked the hotel that day?
Well, yeah, when we flew back that Monday, coming back from Podcast Movement, I'm thinking more and more about it on the plane. And then I got back, I landed, and literally from where I landed to where I needed to go to the hotel was only a few minutes away. I walked into the hotel and got the room signed.
Oh, Sean, you know what I thought you meant is that you got the hotel for the conference, like you booked your room there.
Oh, no. I'm sorry, no.
Wow.
Yeah, no, I didn't do that. If I didn't plan, I really shouldn't be running an organizational podcast. Even though I can be honest that sometimes things fall through the cracks, that would have been a big one. But no, it was actually the one that I planned to do this event for. And this is kind of that imperfect action that I knew I want to have an event. I want to have a close event where I can have 10 people and myself go through some of the trials and tribulations of how they're going to go ahead and successfully move their business or a personal goal forward. And that's what it's about. It's about moving themselves forward through action.
I think that so many of us, both ADHD and not, who have had challenges throughout their life, who have really demonstrated resiliency and that perseverance, have demonstrated true grit. I think these are some of the character aspects that really take us to taking this challenge, the struggle, and when we can rise up from that to not just share it with others, but use it to inspire others. I don't remember where I heard this, but the definition of success is just getting back up one more time than you get knocked down.
Well, what do you hear? You hear every sports analogy under the sun. The quitter was the one who was 3 feet away from the goal line. And it's all very true. Mm-hmm. The human spirit is one that needs to go ahead and continue to persevere. The moment we actually give that up is when we are in essence have truly quit or become a failure. And I think you and I both know, through podcasting, meeting individuals, talking to people, that you can sense if you can make a difference in someone's life in that respect and help them to keep moving themselves in a positive direction, you've actually helped to light a candle to the world.
Sean, I want to go back for a moment because, your story, and I'm sure you've shared this in other podcasts and on your own podcast, but for people that are, that Sean Akerman is a new name and they've never heard of the You Leading You podcast, and they hear that, wait, he lost his home and everything he owned in this hurricane. I mean, when I take myself there, what would that be like? It's I don't even think you can truly empathize completely until you go through something like that.
Well, and it's definitely something that I would never want to live through again. And by the way, Eric, I apologize. Everybody does this. It's actually Ackerman, not Akerman. And that's okay. Trust me, a lot of folks.
And I've gotten Eric Tivers for so long. It's so Ackerman.
No, and it's Eric Tivers.
Yes.
And I always think of this way. I always think of it, shiver me Tivers.
And it's so funny. I had some camp counselors when I was a kid that would call me that, and I hated it. And now I just think it's funny. I don't know why it bothered me so much.
Oh no, you've got to. You know what? You've definitely got to go ahead and at Halloween, especially since you've got children. Definitely wear a pirate outfit, and you and your child can go out Halloween, and go ahead and shiver me Tivers. So
last year for Halloween, I was the flu.
Oh,
I literally had the flu, and I sat on my porch with a
with
a basket that was like 8 feet away from me.
I was gonna say, did you have a sign like quarantined around your neck or anything like that?
I was really just like, sort of antisocial, but just take one, and then I just kind of put my blanket over me.
And this is the fun thing about us folks, by the way, with both Eric and myself, we do go off in a lot of different directions. But, you were mentioning about empathy, and you know what, Eric, I had never until losing everything, and not everything. I'll say that we had a storage unit worth of stuff left after our 11 years. We had, a 15 by 10 storage unit left of any belongings we could scavenge together. But it's interesting, you watch the news and you watch floods or fires and you see these people displaced or homeless or earthquakes, and you really have no true sense of the desperation and some of that aloneness and isolation that you feel until you're put into that situation. And it definitely enlightened my world and gave me a different sense of being after that. Wow,
I mean, it's a really powerful story. Because I think that a lot of people could just, they think that how could I go on after that? But somehow we do.
Well, and it's funny because, I'm getting the news and, if we want to go ahead and steer away from this or steer on it, I'll go either way. But, we're down in Disney, folks, and I'm on vacation. We're on a family vacation, not only my wife and I and my 2 daughters, but then also 2 of my sister-in-laws, one with also another husband and 2 kids, and then another one with a spouse. So here we are, the 10 of us are having a blast down in Disney, and I get a phone call from my other sister-in-law. By the way, my wife's family is pretty large. There's 5 siblings plus my wife. So I get a phone call from my sister-in-law in New York. It says, I got some bad news. I'm like, oh great, tree hit the house, thinking hurricane, tree limb fell down. Ugh. Well, no, unfortunately, there was a 6-foot flood that went through the home. Oh, well, that's unexpected. That was really my reaction. I'm like, oh, that's unusual. And she sends me a picture with this mud on the ground, and I'm like, oh, well, that's not really good. And I'm thinking, and by the way, my wife hates the way that I have a defense mechanism when things like this happen, because I just start making jokes out of it and, taking light of it, because in the end, what real impact do you have on the situation?
Right. From where you were at that point. So
absolutely. And so we sent the kids away as I'm sitting on the other end of the dining hall, talking to my sister-in-law. I walked back over and said, hey, somebody go send the kids for ice cream. So we sent the kids away and proceeded to tell my wife, and then tried to see what we could do to get home. And we were scheduled to actually go home, I think, 2 days after that. And come to find out we couldn't get home because there were numerous airlines, trees, you name it, transportations that were down. Ended up having to stay in Disney for another 3 days.
Oh my! What a paradox! What a juxtaposition! Oh my gosh!
Yeah, let's see. I'm in the happiest place on earth. I just got the crappiest news, sorry, that I could have gotten. But I got 3 more days in Disney. I'm good to go. Oh, but
Wow.
it was what it was. You couldn't really do anything about it. Now we kind of, and I want to say shielded our daughters from it. I mean, at the time, let's see, they were 7 and 9 at the time. So, the life that they knew was no longer there.
Yeah.
Everything they had grown up with was changed at that point.
Oh.
Well, and what I said was we got back, my wife and I, we got in after dark. We sent my kids off with the in-laws, and my wife and I went to the house and just kind of walked inside for a moment and walked back out and went back to my mother-in-law's to sleep for the night. And next day we began throwing things out.
Wow. How long ago was this?
This was actually back in 2011. So this was in September of 2011. And so we did what we needed to do. We got rid of everything. 6 dumpsters later, we got rid of everything that belonged in the house, and basically decided to go ahead and because of the area, and we needed to go ahead and move away. Luckily enough, we had insurance. We were one of the only individuals in the neighborhood who had flood insurance. Thank God.
Oh my gosh.
So that was actually a blessing that we were able to go ahead and do that. And we
It's
had.
too bad I don't have an flood insurance sponsor for the show, because this would be great.
Yeah, Allstate. No, we can get Flo to do this for us. But anyway, we got back, we got everything cleared up, and within 2 months we found a home. We kept the kids in the same schools. We wanted normalcy for them. And we put our lives right back into full gear, including moving into a new home unexpectedly. So,
Sean, I just, here's what I'm taking from that, and I hope that the listeners are looking at this as well. So, 2011, you basically lose everything of material value.
Mm-hmm.
It's 2014, so that's 3 years. Check my math because it's not good. So that's so it's almost like think about the worst, whatever your worst thing that you can imagine in your life. So this is for the listeners. Whatever that challenge is, whatever that worst case scenario is, that for a challenge that you're dealing with right now, what's the worst that can happen, and then how long would it last for? I think Sean's story of losing basically everything of material value, and here he is now 3 years later, and I'm sure it was a challenging 3 years, but 3 years later, he's back up and running in a new home. His business is moving forward. He is doing this podcast. He is leading forward. I mean, I think that forward momentum piece is so important that, no matter what happens to us, these are things, of course, that we don't want to have happen to us. But it seems like when we dig and we can find this inner strength, that can really even surprise ourselves, what kind of resiliency we have. So whatever challenge you're facing right now, so what's the worst that can happen? And if it does happen, even though I wouldn't like it to happen, I can deal with it.
Yeah, perseverance is key, and I think that speaks volumes, Eric, is that, people need to know that even when the darkest day, there is something to go ahead and look to move towards. I mean, no matter what, as long as we're here and we can go ahead and really move ourselves ahead of where we are right now, then we're in a good place. We really are, and all of us have that power within us. Regardless of our situation, whether it be personal, professional, financial, mental, you name it. It's all something that we have to put our energy behind and to look to persevere through.
So is there besides the notion of, and I think a lot of podcasters kind of all collectively have this kind of failing forward mentality, because we're all kind of figuring this stuff out together, and we're all messing up together, and we're learning from each other's mistakes. And so I'm wondering, do you have any particular, whether it's a certain mindset, a habit, something that has really helped you stay positive and stay focused?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, and let me start off with the fact that, I've been, since I really started my professional career back in the early 90s, I started using a Franklin planner. So I've always had the idea and the mentality of prioritizing and planning and future planning. And, I can say that for, 21, 22 years, going on 22 years now, I've had a planner, attached to really my hip. And that's been, forget Evernote, it's a second brain, but that's always been the ability for me to go ahead and keep myself in task, because if I'm not worrying about that other problem that's coming up, because again, as you and I both know, we will lose it and then forget it and then we won't remember it. Well, if I don't have to worry about that, that's given me a huge sense of relief. So my biggest system has really been a weekly session of planning every Saturday and or Sunday morning, because it depends on what's going on, because family comes first on those days. But Saturday or Sunday morning, I'll sit down for roughly about an hour in the morning, look at the previous week, look at the upcoming week in both my business during the day that I work with, as well as what I'm doing with the podcast, You Leading You, and moving it forward in the evening. And then also make sure that I schedule time in for my family, for internal things like reading, and even some enjoyment, whether it's scheduling a walk-in. But I schedule everything in, and then I live with my schedule.
That's great, and I think that I'm hoping that listeners who have listened to the podcast for a while are saying, "Oh, Sean does that too," because I share that with the listeners. That's one of the things that I do as well, is that really intentional planning session that I do on a weekly basis. And then I have the monthly and quarterly version of that as well. That's kind of a deeper dive into that, because I look at what I want to accomplish today is broken down from what I want to accomplish this week. What I want to accomplish this week is broken down from the month to the quarter to the year to the next 5 years.
And that's really the key. The key is to go ahead and make sure that you break that down and break that down and break that down again. Because, again, the moment I think that anyone looks at some larger obstacle, they see the elephant in the room, even if it's a smaller component of the overall goal, they still are daunted by it. They're still fearful of it because it's too large. But if you actually say, read 2 pages a day out of a book, if it's a 200-page book in 100 days, you're done, as opposed to procrastinating for 2 months. You have to look at those things, and you take one bite of the elephant at a time to go ahead and reach those goals.
Absolutely. We were talking before about some books, and you mentioned 7 Habits.
Absolutely. I love, it's interesting. That's actually the first audiobook I ever listened to, even before. Now, I'm a huge fiction fan, huge Stephen King fan, Clive Barker, Dean Koontz. But the first audiobook I ever listened to was a tape set of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I was probably, I would probably have to say I was 16 at the time. And it left a very profound impact on, somebody who, for the most part, had never listened to an audiobook prior to that. But on top of that, to listen to a business audiobook.
Yeah, and I listened to that. I actually found the CD of that at a Goodwill. I got it for like $2, and I listened to that in grad school. And I've actually I found it just recently, and I've been thinking about listening to it again, because it makes a very strong impact. And the reading is really good. So I think, Sean, right now I'm going to take a quick moment just to thank my sponsor, Audible. Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of the Highly Successful Person is a classic when it comes to personal development and business podcasts. I would really encourage everyone who has not read or heard the 7 Habits book to go check it out. And you can do it with no risk by going to audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. Again, that's audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired for your free audiobook download. Okay, and we are back. So, where are we going from here? I don't know. You told me. So right before,
is that a segue for me? I can go ahead and plug that in if you need to. No,
no, it's for we. To tell the listeners, before I hit record, I told I was sharing with Sean that I have like half a brain today. My son was sick. He had some asthma stuff going on this weekend, and so my sleep has been worse than usual, which is it's already an issue that I work on. So my brain's really a half-mast today. So Sean did tell me that, all right, if you need help, I'll just take over the podcast and I'll kind of lead the show. And I said, okay. So
Well, and Eric knows there's one thing that the reason I wanted to do a podcast is because I wanted to see how many rooms I can have devoid of oxygen at any one time just by me talking in them. And you know what? Hey, if you folks have really enjoyed this thing today with Eric and myself, let us know at Eric Tivers and at You Leading You, and we'll be happy to go ahead and listen to exactly what you guys thought about this episode today. Dun. How you like that, Eric?
That's sweet. And I'm still learning Twitter, and it's like, oh, you can have these conversations on Twitter. I'm like just figuring this out, and it's I mean, it's less than a year ago, I did not understand the first thing about Facebook. And now I'm actually doing a whole coaching group on Facebook.
Well, and that's just it. I mean, the power of social media. I mean, up until a year and a half ago, I was in the same boat where I'm looking at Facebook as really the place where I post inappropriate pictures. And now I'm realizing, oh yeah, hey, I'm going to start a business on here. Yeah, I probably shouldn't do that anymore. So I think I'm going to stop now. but in all seriousness, maybe.
I've been looking for those pictures.
Yeah, I took them down once I started. But no, in all seriousness, it's funny how much social media has become that second, third, and fourth conversation that we have, and really changed, especially for ADHD individuals, how they can communicate as well.
Now, Sean, you said that you use a Franklin planner, and I'm assuming that's the paper version.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yep, it's the paper version. You know what? I was never a fan of double entry, and don't get me wrong, because I end up doing it anyway with my Google Calendar, but that's just to go ahead and sync my appointments for interviews and business as well.
But I assume you have one that's considered your master, and that okay.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so the Franklin Planner is actually my master because that stays with me at all times, and believe it or not, it's not electronic, it's paper. Now, what I do is if there's any time blocks on that Sunday, what I'll do is I'll actually block out in my Google Calendar the time blocks associated with any major activities. So anything from a walk to an interview to something for my 9-to-5 job to something for the podcast or anything else, all has a block of time associated with it. But the details are actually kept in my paper function. And I use Evernote to go ahead and back that up, though.
Cool. That's so. Now, do you use a smartphone? Do you use apps and things like that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I do use an iPhone, Evernote continuously.
How do you use Evernote?
How do I use Evernote? Mm-hmm. I have a few different things that I'll use. One is I use their checklist feature quite often when I'm doing things throughout the day. So, for example, if I'm working with something in the podcast, I actually have a checklist for every episode, from everything from the interview process all the way through the launch. I'll have a checklist for everything that I'll do as far as work is concerned during the day with different projects that I'm on. So I use the checklist quite often, but then I also am using it in a group collaboration area so that we are working, kind of using it as a Dropbox feature, but we're working on a program together with a couple of individuals. I also keep everything from the podcast in Evernote for research. So when I did Eric Tivers, I have an Eric Tivers folder or note in Evernote that contains everything from pictures to website snippets that contain a lot of secondary information.
That's great. That's great information. For me, I really didn't like Evernote, and then I kept hearing everyone talking about it, and kind of with that same story of, I didn't really like it, but then I looked back at it and started to like it. So I'm like, I'll give it another look. And I've really been getting into it pretty heavily, and it's really helpful for lots of things. And you mentioned the checklist. It's funny because the guide that I use during the interviews is exactly that. So I have a checklist, and so when I ask you about something that I want to make sure I do, I check it. So and then I uncheck it after the episode and go through and repeat it again.
Yep. Yeah, I do the same. A very similar process. I have one, and the thing is, I have one for each attendee. So when I'm done with Eric Tivers' checklist, I also have on there in case any notes came up, and then I can always reference back to it. And what I actually have is one Evernote folder or Evernote notebook that contains just all templates. So I have all my blanks there that I can just make a simple copy and
that's good. I'm taking that tip.
Oh, definitely. I do not like recreating things at all. That's why between that and actually Streak for Gmail is a huge benefit as well.
What's that?
Well, Streak is actually an app that you can get through the Gmail app accessories for Gmail itself. And what it'll do is actually help you to not only track emails going outbound, but it'll also help you to go ahead and create templates so that I can use canned templates for things such as an upcoming guest, your episode is launching. I have all these templates set up so that I don't have to repeat the information. All I have to do is enter in some key data, such as a change in the episode number, plug in maybe a name and a company information, and then I can personalize it a little bit. But all the core information and things that I want to have in that email are there. And it's a great template. So definitely take a look at that. Streak for Gmail.
That's awesome. Is that any different from Boomerang as far as you know?
Similar in design to Boomerang, but I've actually heard more positive things about Streak, so I started using it, and I've been an avid follower.
Okay, I've been using Boomerang for a while, and I love it. I've never actually heard of Streak, so I'm definitely going to look into that. That's very exciting. I love when I learn new things from my guests.
Absolutely.
So I want to respect your time, because I know that you said that you have another interview you're going to be jumping on here in just a moment. So if you don't mind, I would like to finish this conversation with the final part of this show, which I call the random question round, which is the part of our conversation that has nothing to do with ADHD, which then paradoxically has everything to do with ADHD.
Yeah, that's not a problem. And Eric, if I didn't have a time constraint, I might want to go ahead and challenge your longest episode run. So we might have to do this again.
Okay, so are we ready for? I'm going to do I'm going to do a 2-question version.
You got it. You got it.
All right. If you had a time machine to go forwards or backwards in time, which way would you go and what would you do?
I would go backwards in time, and what I would actually like to do, to be honest with you, it's always fascinated me to have that unending mystery about the Kennedy assassination. I would like to be there on the grassy knoll and actually know the truth of what occurred.
Wow.
And the reason I say that, it's funny. Growing up, and I'll make this brief, but growing up, my mother, actually my grandmother, had a book about, the Kennedy assassination and a lot of details that were associated with it. And it was always something that had interested my mother's family. So I've always had that tickle in the back of me of what really occurred. So that's why.
That's so interesting. And then I didn't even see that answer coming at all, so I'm really huh.
Well, that's okay. I didn't see the question coming either, so that's okay.
That's the whole point of this part of the segment. Okay, next question, and last and final question, and then you'll let people know where they can find you. If you could be a comic book character, who would you be?
You know what? And it's funny. That's easy. I've been a comic book fan since I was a kid, and Wolverine has always been my favorite character. And it's funny, we talked about resiliency and that getting up when you're falling down. Forget movies and forget the popular connotations of the character, but the one thing that always struck me was this, underdog who always came back fighting and swinging even when the odds were against him. So it's easy for me. Wolverine.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And you did mention you're going to Comic-Con.
Yeah, actually, I'm stoked. I've got my press pass. I'm going to be interviewing actually a member of Tara from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Amber Benson, and I've got a couple other interviews that are lined up. So we'll be seeing those on You Leading You, and very ecstatic with the fact that the podcast has given me the authority and credentials to be able to speak as a member of the press. I'm very honored.
That's so cool. So Sean, thank you so much for your time, and can you tell the ADHD Rewired community where they can find you, learn more about what you're doing, and then we'll take it out from there.
You got it. I can be found at You Leading You, and that's YOU Leading You, YOU.com, as well as at You Leading You on Twitter. Facebook page is You Leading You. Hey, you're seeing a common theme here. And on iTunes and Stitcher under, okay, you guessed it, You Leading You.
What was that name? I didn't.
I think it was me leading you. No, You Leading You.
You leading who?
Yeah, exactly.
Sean, thanks again so much, and we will definitely be in touch in our different online circles, and hopefully at some point we'll be able to actually meet face to face. Any plans to be in Chicago for the National CHAD Conference?
No, unfortunately not. But you know what, though? I will go ahead and keep my eyes open because there are a lot of great conferences. I'll have to say this. The ability to go ahead and connect with my online peers at these local events or these conferences is tremendous. So I'll be looking in 2015 as this year is ending out to go ahead and meet up with you too, Eric.
Sean, this has been a pleasure, and best of luck to you.
All right. Thanks, Eric.
You're welcome. Goodbye. Well, ADHD Rewired community, you have just listened to another episode of, yes, you guessed it, ADHD Rewired. Guys, thanks for all the reviews that you left me. Thanks to MS Design Pro who said, great show and advice for ADHD. Your advice is spot on and I really enjoy listening. Thanks for all the useful tips and info about ADHD and living with ADHD. And here's another review from Hey, It's Me, Brother, who says, awesome. Great podcast by a great man. I don't know if that's a family member of mine. And if it is it okay for me to share that one? I don't know who it is, though. It could be. So thanks, brother. Do you have a story you want to share about your ADHD? If you want to be a guest on ADHD Rewired, go to ADHDrewired.com and click the yellow Be a Guest bar. It is officially ADHD Awareness Month. What are you doing to share and spread information about ADHD? Do you have an event regarding ADHD that you want to share with others? Send me an email or let me know. Go to ADHDrewired.com or join us on Facebook and find us at ADHD Rewired on Facebook. If you're looking for a productivity coach, you can schedule a 20-minute free consultation with me by going to my website. Go to erictivers.com and click on the Schedule an Appointment bar. The 2014 CHAD International Conference on ADHD is coming to Chicago November 13th through 15th. I mentioned before I will be a speaker there, so I do hope that you will come to my session and sign up for this conference. They did extend the early bird rate, which when this comes out, there may be a day left to the rate. So go to chad.org now and sign up. Also, as a reminder, if you live in Northern Illinois, I'd like to invite you to the Northern Illinois chapter of CHAD. We meet on the third Monday of every month at 6:45 p.m. in Grays Lake. You can find links on my website. Go to chad.org and search for supports and resources to find a CHAD group in your area. And just as a reminder, CHAD has not endorsed me or this podcast or this message. But they should, don't you think? What else? And to all the members of the ADHD Rewired online coaching group, and to everyone else out there, yes, we're all grown-ups, but star charts are not just for kids. Track your goals, track your progress, and see your growth. Until next time.